Joining us to further unpack the Israel-Iran conflict is Professor David Monyae, Director at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Good afternoon, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us on Point. Now, world leaders have reacted to the insertion of the United States in the conflict between Israel and Iran, and most of those leaders calling for some sort of a return to a diplomatic path to restore or resolve disputes. Your views, firstly, on the US's actions after informing the world that they would give Iran a 2-week deadline?
I think that's lack of trust, and I think it goes a long way in eroding the global institutions of governance, the UN itself, international law, and therefore diplomacy, as South Africa stands to constantly say, is the only way out in situation of this magnitude. And therefore, I think going forward, we're going to see more negative impact of this attack as Iran has much more tools at its disposal to destabilize the region and the world economy.
But Trump, though, appears to be hoping that these strikes will somehow force Iran to make greater concessions at the negotiating table. But I know some probably hold your views that it's unlikely that a nation that was unwilling to concede while under Israeli attack will be more inclined when America's bombing them, because those bombs are also falling.
Oh, indeed. Actually, there is nothing on the table that will attract Iranians to go back while Israel is constantly bombarding Iran. And I think there is a need to level the playing field to ensure that the bombardment of Iran by Israel stops, have somehow easing up of the conflict, direct fire, and ensure that all parties are back on the table to discuss issues. But as it stands, I doubt very much if Iran would go directly opening up another front with the United States. I think it will try to respond positively to President Trump's offering in terms of one's bombardment and try to bring Iran to a peaceful resolution of the nuclear crisis.
Now, Professor, regime change has been inserted into this whole debate around this conflict. One expert I actually spoke to a bit earlier on said regime change could be the desire of Benjamin Netanyahu, with the belief that a change in government could possibly see a new leader abandon Iran's nuclear program, but stating that for the United States, it wouldn't be so much. They wouldn't be interested in some sort of a regime change, that here Donald Trump is still trying to be the peacemaker he had committed he would become in this term.
I think for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, regime change has always been the hallmark of his entire political life. Since 1980s, they have been arguing for regime change in so many places. And to put it quite fairly, I think he has won in so many places, in Iraq, in Syria, and so many other places. But Iran is not Iraq, nor is it Libya. To push for a regime change, I think it would be detrimental to the United States and to the international community. I think what this will do, as lessons we've learned in Afghanistan, Libya, and so many others, is that it will spread the crisis, affecting markets, affect transport routes, and also getting bigger powers bogged down, something that the entire MAGA movement in the United States is arguing against.
You're the second expert to remind us that Iran is not Iraq, Iran is also not Libya. But when we look at the strategy employed by Benjamin Netanyahu, some say that he really has encircled his target, that for the longest time, if many were not aware, we saw an Israel that decided to target what would be called the proxy military support of Iran, that should Iran be bombarded, these were the people that could have easily come to their aid. We're talking Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and the regime of Bashar al-Assad, who has since fallen. So many have said that the strategy was always quite visible, that it was to encircle him. Later on, you have the target at the center, but you weaken the axis. Some sort of your support must be weakened before they actually attack Iran.
Yeah, but that strategy is quite weak because as much as the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and so many others in Iraq and other proxies for Iran are weakened, they are not defeated. They still carry quite enormous weight. They still have weapons. The Houthis can still attack Israel, as we can see. The last few weeks, they have been attacking Israeli airports and so many other places. And therefore, I mean, in a full-fledged war, I think it won't be to Israel's advantage, nor to United States. And that argument has been going on for quite some time, that Israel is doing this to give United States an upper hand, so to go for Russia and ultimately for China, retaining global hegemony. It's not going to work. United States nor Israel, they're not winning all these wars that they've been waging for the last few decades.
But what of the argument that withdrawing in the United States, they could actually win this war because the United States has at least the military capabilities to finish Iran in this instance, because they have the kind of bombs that would be needed to go underground where some of the nuclear programs are?
Oh, indeed. But our understanding of wars is that possessing the biggest gun or biggest bomb does not necessarily mean winning wars. United States has been doing that in Iraq, in Afghanistan. I think you still remember the mother of all bombs in Parabora in Afghanistan. Yeah. I mean, in the end, United States retained the Taliban into power in a humiliating withdrawal, as bad as it was in Vietnam. And I think there's nothing that stops Iranian to humiliate United States should they put boots on the ground. I don't think they can win wars by just detonating big bombs on mountains. And all indications are showing that they might not be having any positive impact on destroying Iranian nuclear, should there be any, which we doubt very much.
And I suppose even spreading the conflict, as you also intimated a bit earlier, because we saw that many held the view that with the invasion of Iraq, what really happened was the creation of ISIS, that you had the likes of Syria and other nations that were now willing to house some of these militias, and really it created some sort of chaos across the world. So most certainly, I suppose, as you say, that it's not the biggest bombs that win wars, but strategy. But on strategy, when it comes to Donald Trump now, Democrats are up in arms. They feel they were not consulted. The House of Representatives have accused Trump actually of pushing the country towards a war they did not approve. Your take on just perhaps the backlash internally or domestically in the United States for just this move?
I do not think President Trump is doing something new. I think he has learned it from the best. The Democrats themselves have played this game for too long. I think Obama went to war without consulting Congress. The wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, they've been on the books. I think since 2001, United States has been using, given Congress itself, has given the White House much more powers. And I think trying to regain that power under this condition is not something that they can win easily. President Trump still has enormous support base, and legally, I think he might win most of these cases that are made by Democrats. But at the end of the day, this shows us that the situation on the ground within U.S., it's declining. There is no unity, and the state itself, it's all over the place, and therefore it weakens the U.S. that we know in terms of being the promoter of democracy, the rule of law, and all what it argues to so many people that it stands for.
And then, Professor, the all-important question, what does all of this mean for the rest of the world, particularly even Africa here, if this conflict were to turn into an all-out war?
I think for South Africa and the rest of the continent is that we are far away from the theater, but nonetheless, our trade is increasingly coming from Asia, our trade with Asia, and destabilization in that part of the world and South China Sea has a huge implication, long-term negative implication on our economies and our standing in the world. However, I think it is important, as South Africa does, keep yourself neutral, non-aligned, however, speak on principle in terms of what you stand for, no violence, and using diplomacy as the best route out of crisis of this nature.
And that is most certainly what President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged for, a return to a diplomatic path to resolve this dispute. Professor, thank you very much for your insights this afternoon. That's Professor David Monyae. He's a director at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg.